cute is this? Today we are going to create a woodland animal theme home decor item for a child's bedroom. I'm going to show you how to make a complementary background, and we're going to use collage papers and gel prints to collage. Let's get started. So I'm actually working on a 10 by 20 canvas. I am going to go in this direction. And what I'm going to use as my focal points, I was able to source from the Dollar Tree, Crafter Square. They have these cute, adorable woodland animals. But if you can't access this, you can buy some woodland animals, either colored or not colored, off of Etsy. And look around. You can find them in lots of places. So in that booklet, you get 2 of each. So I'm not sure which ones I want, but I want to cut them, fussy cut them, to be able to play with them on my surface and make some decisions about which ones I want, how many I want. So I'm just going to fussy cut all of them. And no, I'm not going to show you all of that because, well, you don't need to watch me cut. Through all that, I decided that I'm going to use these 3 elements. That looks, 3 is always good on the page. Now I'm going to start working on my background, and I'm going to kind of do a forest theme, woodland. And so 2/3 down, I'm just going to use my Stabilo All pencil and just give myself a guideline. Below that line, I want kind of grass. Above it, I'm going to have sky. And here are the colors: Prussian blue, burnt sienna, Naples yellow. Pretty much those are the only colors I'm going to use. Now for the bottom, I am going to mix Naples yellow and Prussian blue. And yes, yellow and blue make green. So I am going to mix them wet on wet and get a very mottled background. I don't mind if there's a little more yellow, a little more blue. I don't want it one tone. That is boring. Now, the canvas, I did give it a coat of gesso to prep and prepare the canvas. That just makes the paint go on a little bit smoother at this stage, which typically means I use less paint. So I'm mixing this, and again, look, you can see I've got some darker areas and lighter areas, and that's just going to add interest. Now, because it's a canvas, you need to treat the sides. And at this point, I'm thinking I'm going to keep where it's green grass, I'm going to keep it green, and where it's blue sky, I want it to be blue. Spoiler alert, I changed my mind, but that's okay. Now, this video is going to be full of tips on working on a canvas because it's slightly different than working on a perfectly flat surface of an art journal page. And you got to keep those things in mind. Now for the sky, I want blue, but what I'm using here, I'm using the Prussian blue. That is kind of the continuity of the whole page. And I'm using this blue gray. And the reason I chose the gray is because there's gray in that raccoon. I want every element of this, the background, the stamping that I do, the focal images, to work together well. So I'm putting that little bit of gray in the sky. I'm also mixing in some white gesso. So I've got the Prussian blue, white gesso, and the gray. And look at it. It does look like a hot mess right now. I don't want a sharp edge where the land meets the sky. Now I went in search of trees, and I found these pictures, and I'm just using this to guide my creation of the trees. Now you could totally freehand them. There's nothing special here, but I'm going to show you kind of a cheat with this. So I've printed it out. I've played with the sizes of these trees and figured out what works best for my composition. And now I'm just putting it on some interesting gel prints. I went through my green file and I'm just cutting the tree out. Now you could totally freehand this if you feel comfortable doing that. But if you don't, here's a workaround. Find something you like and use it to guide your work. So there is one tree. Now I like the branches inside this, so I'm just cutting this out, and I've got some blank copy paper underneath, and I'm trying to give it a little bit longer stem because I want the tree as tall as I want the tree. And then what I'm going to do is put a coat of brown, and I'm adding a little bit of that Prussian blue. That is the cohesive color. It's in everything, and it just gives it that two-tone. So I'm just going to work on each tree. I'm going to cut it out of a gel print, use a variety of gel prints that work together, and I cut out it more than what I'm going to need, and then I play with it, so some make the cut and some don't. And here we have the trees cut out with the gel prints that I'm going to use. I'm playing with the sentiment, let the adventure begin. I am making this as a baby gift for a baby's room. My friend is doing it in the Woodland Animal theme, so I want something cohesive. I don't want something overly childish. I want something to last a little bit longer. So each step I'm basically doing exactly the same thing. Now this stencil is called Grass. It is a Crafter's Workshop stencil, and I can go on here and I'm making some grass for the bottom, and I'm using a combination of Hooker's green with, you guessed it, the Prussian blue. So there's the grass, and now I'm going to darken the border around that because now it's dark, and I want it to, at this point, I wanted it to match. This stencil I will list in the description box. I think it's Swirling Something. It's a brand new one from Crafter's Workshop, and I'm using a little bit of gray, a little bit of white, and I just want the swirl to represent wind in the sky. If you make a mistake, you can grab a baby wipe it off. Actually, I did a better job of the first one, so I'm not sure why I didn't erase it. But this is just one layer. I am going to do some more stenciling and more stamping on top of this, so it doesn't have to be so precise. Now, working on canvas when you're stenciling, there's more likelihood of it seeping under, if you're not getting exact, because the canvas has movement. It's not a flat, solid surface. This stencil is called Knitting Things, another Crafter's Workshop one, and I am using burnt sienna, and I'm using that color because it is the color resembling that fox, which is my central focal image. I also like how the kind of V shape of this matches the facial features of my woodland creatures. And when I say, like, you want all your elements to work together. I grab my Stampendous dot stamp, and I'm using Prussian blue here, and I'm just adding some dots to my background. I'm not getting perfect stamping because, again, that canvas moves. You can put a book underneath or a platform of some sort to make it solid, and I do that later on when I'm stamping the sentiment on. But I'm okay with the less than precise. I have this alphabet stamp. This is a Stamperia set from Vicky Papineau. Now I was going to use the block, but I decided because of the give of the canvas, I'm just going to press where I want it. So I'm not getting a full stamp, and I don't care. I'm good with little bits. This is just adding some interest to my background. I'm not trying to get a precise stamp. If you wanted more precise, you would need to put a book underneath to solidify so that the canvas didn't move. This is another one. It's kind of a globe adventure travel theme, and I'm using Naples yellow. Remember, I'm using Naples yellow, burnt sienna, and Prussian blue. So here I'm pressing on the back to get a bit, I want to make sure that I get the circular shape of this, even if it's not going to be a perfect stamp. So I'm reaching behind and putting pressure from behind. Ideally, I should have put a book underneath to solidify it. I wasn't sure of my sentiment at this time, but I knew it was going to be something about adventure, travel, explore. So that's why I chose this motif. I'm just putting the paint on with a makeup sponge. The reason I'm not worried too much about it being so precise, I'm going to put a lot of collage papers on here. The trees are going to be collaged on, as well as the focal image. So a lot of this is going to end up being hidden. Now, I use the Naples yellow in the sky part, and I'm using the Prussian blue down below. So using the same stamp, but two different colors, works really well. So once that was all dry, I put back all my elements to see, do I like it? Do I not like it? And I decided I wanted to do some splatters before I glued everything down. So I grabbed copper. It resembles the burnt sienna color. I'm mixing that with water and splattering with my fan brush. And then I decided to add some gold, which is like the Naples yellow. And there is a close-up of what we have so far. We have created a background that works with the focal images, sky and ground, grass and sky. But we have a lot of interest in it. So now we need to start gluing down our elements. So first things first, we need to glue the trunk of the tree onto the tree. I showed you a piece of paper where I made a little extra. I painted the brown with the Prussian blue in case I need to elongate any of my trunks. I'm using fluid matte medium to glue this on. So I'm gluing this on first, and I'm going to do that with all my trees. So for, when I'm doing a lot of repetitive stuff, I'm speeding up the video. And then I'm going to start gluing down the elements. What's behind gets glued down first. So this one, we just have the tree. Now see, it ends up floating, so I cut a piece from my painted one and I just elongated it. This tree goes behind the larger one, so I'm going to glue it first. Then this one goes over top. So just take your time when you get to this point. Say what's behind. What's behind gets glued down first. And there I had to add another piece to elongate it. Positioning, I want the fox kind of in the middle and this tree right here between the deer. So I'm putting things back in place just to make sure I get a great placement. So I'm happy with where the deer is, so I'm going to use some either gel medium or fluid matte medium. Both work equally well. These papers from the crafter or from Dollar Tree are very, very thin. So I'm gluing everything down, making sure it's lying flat, elongating the trunk if I need to, going back, making sure everything is going to stick properly, and then my focal images. So the raccoon's kind of in front of this tree, the deer's in front of the other one, and the fox is in the middle. Now, I decided not to glue the fox down because I know I need to shade around the trees, and I thought it would be easier. So if I was doing this again, I would just glue the trees down, none of the animals, and then do the shading, and you don't have to work around the animal. And it might be a little easier to shade. I'm using my angle brush. I'm using the technique that's called floating acrylic that I learned from folk art painting. I will link that video if you want to check that out. So the shading that I'm doing here is just making the trees stand out. I'm doing it around the trunk of the tree, the brown part, as well as the green. And you can see the difference that this makes. I do add some highlights later on. I don't think that footage is included, so I add a little bit of white or a little bit of the Naples yellow for the highlights. And when it's dry, I come back and I add more if I decide that I need more. Here I'm going out, not on top of the tree, but beside it on the actual canvas, and I like that two-tone shading look. That just makes it stand out even more. So this is a long process. It's not hard. I find it very zen. So once the trees are all shaded, then I'm going to glue the fox down, and I don't have to work around that fox's head in the trees. You want to make sure that you dry it in between layers, because if the black paint from the shading isn't perfectly dry, when you do glue the fox down, you're going to smear. So now I want to bring out the focal images a little bit more. So I am using the same kind of colors with acrylic paint, a little bit of gesso, and I'm watering down things a little bit, and I'm painting, making the whites brighter and the browns a little darker. I want it a little more. I want this to look more like I painted it than I just glued a picture down. Now remember, this had a good coat of matte medium on it, which sealed that Dollar Tree paper pictures. And that's really important. You don't want it to pill and stuff. So make sure it's coated with a good coat of gel medium, or you could put clear gesso on top just to make it into a non-porous surface. So I'm just adding a couple shades of brown, mixing a little bit in there, making the whites and lights brighter and making it look better. Then I'm also going to shade around it in the same way that I shaded around the tree. Now I'm going to admit, at this stage, I really loved how it was all coming together. I had so many reservations about doing this baby gift. It's very specific. It's not exactly in my comfort zone. But you know what? I just had to start and figure it out. Now for the fox, I am using, you guessed it, the burnt sienna. I've watered it down and I'm making the fox, I'm deepening the color because I want it to go very well with the burnt sienna that I stenciled in the background. And here I'm going over the white or lighter part of the fox. And I'm using a mixture of unbleached titanium and white gesso. It was the right color. And then I'm just painting in the nose and putting the eyes back and the marks on the fox's chest area. And then I'm going to do some shading around the fox. The fox is the brightest with the burnt sienna. That's why I chose to put him in the middle. I also positioned the animals as to how they were looking. So it looks like the raccoon and the deer are both looking at the fox from either side. If you buy Woodland Animals from Etsy, sometimes you have the ability to flip it, so you can have them looking either way, and you have more options that way when you buy digital files. I'm using some gray and white and overpainting the raccoon here. Just go step by step by step. This project, it probably took 2 to 3 hours in full completion, playing around, cutting everything out, footage that wasn't here. It is a big project, but you could have just done the raccoon with the one tree on an art journal page, or the fox and the trio of trees. So don't think, oh, she did it on canvas, I don't want to do canvases. This could be just an art journal page very easily. Here again, I'm adding brights, lights, adding some shading, some highlights with white there you saw me doing. And I'm going back and forth, keep looking at it. Do I need more? What do I need to add? What do I need to... Now the outside edge, I decided that I'm going to paint it black because there's the black shading and everything on the canvas, and I wanted it to go together. Now, right there, I just showed I'm putting a case underneath because I'm going to stamp these letters saying Adventure and Waits on the canvas. And I want it to be pretty precise. I don't want it to be a mess. So I'm putting some support underneath. I'm using my wooden letter blocks and putting on the paint with a blending foam and stamping. Cleaning off the stamp in between. Now I pre-stamped it Adventure and Waits to get the spacing, to get the actual placement and be able to figure out where I wanted it to be. Giving it a little pressure. Remember, there's that box underneath. Giving support. So the canvas isn't moving now. I don't try to make it perfectly level because I can't. So I accept the imperfections, and then there's a baby wipe if you don't. And because everything is dry underneath and everything is permanent, I can erase it if I needed to. And several times I did. It's not a precise process. Didn't like that one. I think I had to stamp this A at least 5 times. It just, there's one letter in every sentiment that continually causes me grief. But persist. I could have used black here. I chose white because I didn't want it to have that much of an impact. I also toyed with the idea of not putting a sentiment at all. Then I decided I want some gold splatter on the trees. So I got my splatter paint out again and I'm splattering with my fan brush. I can't tell you how much I love this. I took a chance. I stepped out of my comfort zone. I haven't done a canvas in a very, very long time. But it all came together, one step at a time. I'm going to give this a coat of varnish. This is clear satin polyacrylic by Minwax, and I give it 2 coats. I'm going to take most of the photographs before I do that because that makes it not take good photos because you end up with a glare. I hope you enjoy it. Wouldn't this make a beautiful art journal page? Just these 2 parts, or these 2. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you give something like this a try. Until next time, go get creative.